much. And I understand that a coroner's inquest was opened and that the post-mortem examinations are inconclusive at the moment. But certainly, as you say, carbon monoxide poisoning.
A quiet holiday escape, a cozy cabin, and two teenagers who were supposed to wake up to another carefree morning. Instead, the silence inside that small cottage in Bridlington hid something far more sinister. Cherish Bean, just 15, and Ethan Slater, 17, went to sleep after a seemingly ordinary evening, but by morning, both were gone. No struggle, no warning, just two young lives suddenly and mysteriously cut short. What investigators discovered inside that holiday park would spark arrests, raise chilling questions, and leave families desperate for answers. Because sometimes, the most peaceful places hide the deadliest dangers, and in this case, a romantic getaway became the beginning of a haunting mystery. What makes this tragedy even more disturbing is how normal everything looked just hours before the nightmare began. Cherish Bean and Ethan Slater were just teenagers, enjoying time away from home. Cherish was only 15, Ethan 17. Two young people who appeared inseparable. Their social media posts showed the kind of carefree happiness you expect from teenagers. Smiles, laughter, and the excitement of being together somewhere new. Nothing about those photos hinted that their story was about to end in such a heartbreaking way. The couple had traveled to the coastal town of Bridlington in the United Kingdom. It's the kind of place families visit for relaxing holidays, quiet surroundings, holiday lodges, and a peaceful atmosphere meant to help people escape everyday life. They were staying at a location known as Little Eden Holiday Park, where families rent small cabins and cottages for short vacations. For Cherish and Ethan, the trip should have been simple and memorable, for all the right reasons, but something went terribly wrong inside the small cabin where they were staying. On the evening of February 17th, Cherish had been spending time at the main family lodge before heading over to a smaller cabin on the property known as the Man Cave. That was where she and Ethan were staying during the trip. At first, nothing seemed unusual. It was just another quiet evening at the holiday park. But at some point that night, Cherish returned to see her mother. She complained of having a headache. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. Headaches are common, especially when people are tired from traveling or staying somewhere unfamiliar. Her mother gave her some medication to help with the pain. After that, Cherish went back to the small cabin where Ethan was waiting. Before going to sleep, she sent her mom a simple message. "Good night, I love you." It was the kind of message that families exchange every day without thinking twice. No one could have imagined that it would be the last message Cherish would ever send. Ethan also returned to the cabin around the same time. By all accounts, everything appeared calm. The two teenagers settled in for the night like any other couple staying in a holiday lodge. Then morning came, and something was terribly wrong. The next day, Cherish and Ethan were found inside the cabin. Both of them had died in their sleep. For investigators, the discovery immediately raised alarm bells. Healthy teenagers don't simply pass away overnight without a cause. When two young people die at the same time in the same location, authorities know right away that something serious has happened. Emergency responders and police arrived quickly after receiving what they described as a safety concern call on February 18th. When they entered the property and discovered the teenagers, it was already too late. Both were pronounced dead. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the local community. Families visiting the holiday park suddenly found themselves surrounded by police activity, investigators, and questions that no one could yet answer. Detectives from Humberside Police immediately launched an investigation. Very early in the process, one possible explanation began to emerge: carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is an invisible and odorless gas that can quietly fill an enclosed space if a boiler, heater, or fuel-burning appliance malfunctions. People exposed to it often feel symptoms like headaches, dizziness, or nausea before eventually losing consciousness. That detail suddenly made Cherish's earlier complaint about her headache feel deeply unsettling. But the investigation didn't stop there. Within a short time, police made a surprising move that suggested they believed someone might be responsible for what happened. A 33-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. The arrest shocked many people following the case. At that point, investigators were still working to determine the exact cause of death. So why would someone already be taken into custody? The answer lies in how seriously authorities treat situations where safety failures might lead to loss of life. If investigators believe that dangerous conditions existed, especially in a rental property meant for guests, they have to consider whether someone failed to maintain or repair something that should have been safe. And that's when the investigation started expanding. Not long after the first arrest, police detained a second man. He was 42 years old and was also arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. Then, as detectives continued examining evidence and speaking with witnesses, another development followed. A third man, 27 years old, was also taken into custody on the same suspicion. Suddenly, the case wasn't just about a mysterious death. It had turned into a potential criminal investigation involving multiple people who might have had responsibility for the property where the teenagers were staying. Meanwhile, investigators focused on something inside the cabin that could hold the key to the entire mystery: the boiler. As investigators continued examining the cabin, one object quickly became the center of attention: the boiler inside the small lodge where Ethan and Cherish had spent their final night. Detectives believed it might hold the key to understanding how two healthy teenagers could fall asleep and never wake up again. The boiler was seized and sent for forensic examination. This step was critical because if the system had malfunctioned, it could have released carbon monoxide into the cabin. Unlike smoke or other gases, carbon monoxide has no smell, no color, and no warning signs that people can easily detect. Victims often don't realize anything is wrong until the symptoms begin: headaches, dizziness, nausea, confusion, and then, eventually, unconsciousness. When investigators looked back at the timeline of events, Cherish's earlier complaint about a headache suddenly became incredibly significant. It was a symptom that could fit perfectly with early exposure to carbon monoxide. But proving that theory wouldn't be simple. Detective Chief Inspector Ben Robinson later confirmed that post-mortem examinations had already taken place. However, the results did not immediately provide a clear answer. The cause of death was listed as inconclusive, meaning investigators needed additional testing to determine exactly what happened. That meant toxicology tests would be necessary. These tests analyzed the blood and tissues of the victims to detect the presence of substances like drugs, chemicals, or gases. In suspected carbon monoxide cases, toxicology can reveal whether dangerous levels of the gas were present in the body. But those results can take time, sometimes weeks. While investigators waited, the legal side of the case continued to unfold. The men who had been arrested were released on conditional police bail. This meant they were not formally charged with a crime, but they remained under investigation and could be required to return for questioning. In the United Kingdom, police are allowed to release suspects while investigations continue, especially in complex cases where forensic evidence still needs to be analyzed. And this was certainly a complex case. Authorities also opened a coroner's inquest into the deaths of Cherish and Ethan. A coroner's inquest is a legal inquiry that seeks to determine how and why someone died, particularly when the death is sudden, unexplained, or potentially linked to safety failures. During the inquest, more details about the teenagers' final hours began to emerge. Witness testimony confirmed that Cherish had left the main family lodge earlier that evening, before going back to the smaller cabin where she was staying with Ethan. After complaining about her headache and receiving medication from her mother, she returned to the cabin and sent that final message saying goodnight. It would be the last contact she ever had with her family. Ethan had returned to the cabin around the same time. The two teenagers likely went to sleep without realizing that the room around them might have been filling with a deadly gas. If carbon monoxide was present, they may have slowly lost consciousness during the night, without ever understanding what was happening. For their families, the tragedy is almost impossible to comprehend. Cherish and Ethan were young, full of life, and deeply loved by those around them. Friends described them as a happy couple who cared deeply for each other. In a heartbreaking statement released by Cherish's family, they remembered Ethan as a kind and loving young man whose smile could light up any room. They also spoke about the bond between the two teenagers, saying Cherish was the apple of Ethan's eye, and that everyone could see how happy they made each other. Two young lives that should have had decades ahead of them, gone in a single night. And while investigators continue searching for answers, one thing remains painfully clear. This case is not just about a tragic accident. It's about whether something could have been prevented. Because if a faulty boiler or unsafe conditions inside that holiday cabin played a role, then the question becomes even more difficult to face. Could these deaths have been avoided? Authorities are still working to uncover the full truth, and until toxicology results and forensic analysis are complete, the mystery surrounding Cherish and Ethan's final moments may remain unanswered. But their story is a powerful reminder of how quickly life can change, and how important safety truly is in places meant to feel like home. If this story moved you, make sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more real cases and investigations. And now I want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe this was a tragic accident caused by a faulty system? Or do you think someone should be held responsible for what happened inside that cabin? Let me know what you think in the comments below.